I'm doing the official recording now.
Nice.
Gary, keep watch. I sweat my balls off. My spider balls, Higgins.
My spider balls.
I'm sorry, you wanted to do an intro.
It's all right. No, Spider-Man.
That's good. That's close.
Spider-Man.
There's like 4 more issues of Decades you got to cover.
Yeah. Spider-Man has got it going on. Did I skip one?
No, I think that song's timeless, so I think you're good. Higgins, there's like 57 years worth of comics we got to get through in an hour, so let's just carry on.
I don't know. That felt pretty good.
That was good. That's good. Ready to start the show though. Thank you. Welcome everyone to the Comicsology Club. It's a podcast where I, Snoop Lynch, and my co-host Higgins Stern.
Hey, that's me.
And he's right there. He sung all the songs you just heard right before this.
Woohoo!
That's all the songs you're going to be singing today because it's business as usual here. And what do we do when we do business, Higgins?
We talk about a comic book that we read, and then we drink a drink while we do it.
Somehow. Some way we managed to do both those things.
And there's a couple other things in the middle or at the end and stuff like that, but like we'll get to that later.
Yeah, I mean, all that matters at the end of the day is that we're friends and we do that together.
Oh, yeah, that's the other part.
Yeah, I got you. This is a team effort. As you know, it wasn't just a 2-person effort last month. We had a sponsor of the podcast, Michael Lopez. He was here to talk about his book that we also talked about, The Eternal Crown, Dawning of the Red Sun.
Yeah, still got it.
The book's not even here anymore.
Yeah.
I put it on the shelf. I finished it.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, because last time, I didn't tell you guys this during the podcast, but I didn't finish the book.
Luckily, both me and Michael had.
Yeah, exactly. You picked up my slack, and I appreciate that. And he picks up our slack by sponsoring this podcast with his business, 008 Studios.
Which you can find at 0-8studios.com.
Some would say it's the best place to find it.
Yep. Yeah. I can't think of any other place to find it unless I go to his door, and I do know where his door is.
I go there once a week, and he asked me to leave. And then we talk about his business a little bit and what they do. Now, Higgins, what do they do?
They help people make media, but not music. Absolutely get out of here with that.
But basically everything else but music.
Basically everything else.
Yeah.
They do art. They got books. They got video games. And they make their own stuff. Michael's been making books, obviously. He's got another one on the way, too, in about a year. They got some video games on the rise. They got some other books on the rise. But they can also help you get your project off the ground. They help the little guy.
That's right. I mean, he's the big guy who helps the little guy or little girl. You know, whoever. I mean, not in that context. That's weird. But point is, he can help you if you're a person who's listening to this and you're like, I would like to write a book like Michael wrote that we talked about last month.
Yeah.
You look at these podcast description notes that Higgins meticulously types out every month. And I also leave a little link there for Michael's website. Go to 0-8studios.com. And guess what? You can get in touch with him that way. You can buy some of his stuff, like that book we mentioned, along with some swag relating to the book and his business as a whole, probably. Maybe a big hoodie.
God, I do need to buy that big hoodie because I love a hoodie.
It's gonna be so comfy when you're taking naps and reading all the books that come out through 0-8 Studios. Go to the podcast descriptions, read Higgins' little blurb about this episode. I'm sure it's so funny. It's just so topical.
It was very funny. There's going to be jokes, puns, and something else.
I mean, but really, who has time for anything else with all those jokes and puns you're throwing in?
Yeah, exactly.
And we don't really have much more time to talk about his business, but definitely go check it out on your own time. Get in touch with him if you have an idea. He'd love to help you out. You know, he's just a good guy to work with. I recommend 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
And I also have something to recommend this month on this podcast. It's a comic. That's right. We're going back to comics.
Oh, shoot.
Did you not read a comic?
No, I did. Don't worry. Hopefully I read the right one.
I know that you kind of need to read the specific comic that I want to talk about if we're going to have any kind of like back and forth this episode. Higgins, I read Spider-Man Life Story.
Oh shoot, that's the one. That's the one that I read. Thank goodness.
Thank God. Thank God. In that case, you can tell me who wrote this book and who put some pictures in it.
God, I can tell you who wrote this book, but I don't 100% know that I can tell you who did the pictures. Chip Zdarsky, who's honestly one of my favorite boys. Mm-hmm. And then Mark Bagley. Yes. I got there just in time.
Very good. Yeah, so Zdarsky wrote it. We've done an episode or two on him before. Sex Criminals comes to mind. We read that book. Love that book. I'm pretty sure we did another Zdarsky book.
Stillwater.
Stillwater, that's right, yeah. So really, really big fan of him as a writer. He's also an artist, but he decided to take a seat back in that department and hand it over to Mark Bagley, who is a big get for a story like this with all the Spider-Man adventures you could hope to read about in one convenient package. So I didn't know a lot about Mark Bagley without really knowing I knew who he was. Basically, he's one of the go-to guys you go to for a Spider-Man comic.
He knows how to draw a Spider-Man, is what you're telling me.
100%, Higgins, 100%. And Zdarsky's no stranger to a Spider-Man story either. So before this book came out, Zdarsky had a run on a Spectacular Spider-Man, which apparently was pretty well received.
I saw that, I think.
And it makes sense just given like Zdarsky's overall kind of laid-back tone with a Spider-Man character.
He does have a kind of quippy attitude. He's already a funny man as far as most of the comics that we've read by him, so it makes sense that the quippy Spider-Man, the funniest of all superheroes, basically.
Yeah, the quippiest of all superheroes.
Yeah, at least quippiest.
Sure, yeah.
Maybe not the funniest, but he's always zinging out one-liners and all that jazz. So.
Yeah, and you definitely don't like miss a beat of that in this story either, so I imagine his Spectacular Spider-Man run is just more of that. And then Mark Bagley, he had a run on The Amazing Spider-Man back in like the 90s. I read a little bit about him just because I wanted to kind of catch up and hear what all the fuss was about, because when he was brought on to do this story, this came out in like 2019, these 6 issues we're going to talk about today. And so when they brought him on board, apparently it was a really big deal, and I wanted to know why. He's got a very interesting kind of like coming up story in comics in particular. So he had kind of given up on doing that work, and his friend told him, this was back in like I think the 80s, told him about a contest that Marvel was hosting, and you submit your stories and your artwork, and then the winner will get handpicked to write for Marvel or draw for Marvel. Wow. And so he decided to enter that just kind of as a like, well, I like to draw comics, why not give it a shot? And then he won by a landslide apparently. And so he worked at Marvel on like little random small things like backup stories and one-shots for a few years until eventually he took over from Eric Larson on The Amazing Spider-Man in 1991. And from there, it was just kind of like huge trajectory in the world of comics, Marvel in particular. So
honestly, in the world of Spider-Man, I'm looking at his like repertoire, and like God, dude drew for like all of the Spider-Mans.
So he apparently was around during he is credited as one of the co-creators of Carnage, which people know Carnage, Venom.
I still haven't seen that movie yet.
I don't know if I ever will. If it's on streaming, why not? But other than that, but yeah, so Carnage, big deal obviously for Spider-Man, and then his looks, his creations are kind of, those are the ones you see everywhere in the public eye. Like for the longest time, if you were going to buy like a Spider-Man cup or like a lunchbox or a thermos, whatever, you'd see a design of Spider-Man swinging around the city. That was his artwork. He's just that guy who kind of created that standard, streamlined Spider-Man look. And so I think obviously that is a big deal at that point to get someone like that on a story like this, where this is going through all of Spider-Man's history while changing some things along the way, but like it's hitting all those core moments. And I'm sure that was kind of surreal for him too, because this starts during his debut in the 60s and it goes all the way up to 2019 when this book was originally published. Yeah. And so I think, like I said, he worked on it in the 90s. So when you get to that issue of, because like each issue is a decade, right? Yeah. It's like, all right, we're going to do the 60s in issue 1, and then we're going to do the 90s in issue 3 or whatever. Like, so when he got to that issue, I'm sure they revisited a lot of things that he worked on. And I think what I mean, it's no secret to you and probably anyone who's listening on this podcast that I love Spider-Man. He's my favorite superhero for sure. And I know it's not like an original answer, but he just, for all the reasons he is. And this is a love letter to that character in probably the best way you could do it, I think.
Oh yeah, 100%. They nail stuff that I've heard, and then like so many other things that I did not know about Spider-Man.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like pretty eye-opening for the character. I mean, I've seen like my foray into Spider-Man is the cartoon back when I was a kid, and then all of the live-action movies that have come out, and that's basically it. Other than the occasional like maybe a comic that you showed me like once or twice. I think I read like one volume of Superior Spider-Man, I think you gave me, or something like that.
I know a long time ago I gave you some issues of the Ultimate Spider-Man
Maybe
run,
that's what it was.
which is a really good introduction to that character and just Spider-Man as a whole, but it's very long. It's like 140 issues or something. And so I can see why it'd be hard to stick with something like that, because honestly, like by the end of it, until I got to like the Miles Morales stuff, which kind of is also in this, there is a lot of like kind of fluff in there, and just kind of like, oh, there's a lot of text, and I like this storyline's not as interesting. But that's why I think this works so well for someone like you in particular, who obviously people know Spider-Man and they love the character and they love him in a movie or whatever. But as far as comics goes, this is just a reward for if you know anything about this character. And
oh yeah, you can be like, oh, I know that part, and then like 3 issues later, you'd be like, oh, I've seen that too.
Yeah.
But then the middle part could be something completely different.
Yeah, and now you do know that, and while they take liberties and kind of how this particular, like this story is contained, it's its own one-off kind of Peter Parker tale spent over 5 decades, and so there is going to be some stuff that is changed, but the core events, they all stem from Spider-Man's actual publication history. So you have the black suit, you have Green Goblin stuff, like all that stuff has happened, and so it's a good catch up if you haven't read any of that before, but then you also aren't held to 80 years worth of continuity.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a good balance. I think that you could read this, find out about those storylines you didn't know anything about, and you could drop it from here and like, oh, this is what happens as far as I know. But if you wanted to, you could go back and read some of those stories that they're originally based on, and yes, the stuff will be different, but now you have enough knowledge in what grounds it to keep up.
Yeah.
And so I think it was a really good idea to do a project like this, and what's interesting is it didn't start out like this. So originally Chip Zdarsky wanted to do this idea, but as a they call it like a maxi series, which is just it's going to kind of be in its own contained continuity, and it's going to envelop the Marvel universe as a whole. So, like with this story, we see all these important historical events in Spider-Man's history. It was going to be everything in Marvel history. So we were going to take elements from like an X-Men and a Fantastic Four, like this big event happened, so we're going to cover that. And it wasn't Chip Zdarsky's idea originally to kind of condense it to just one character. That credit actually goes to a guy named Tom Brevoort, and so he was the editor at the time, kind of talking with Zdarsky about it, and he's the one who kind of came up with the idea to let's just pick a character and focus on their events throughout their history.
Yeah, and they still incorporate a lot of the important like Marvel stuff that happens with some different characters. Like a big portion of this book is the Civil War story, at least as far as I've gathered.
Like, no, yeah, 100%.
I mean, Tony Stark and Steve Rogers are at each other's throat. Captain America, Iron Man, just gunning for each other this entire like run basically that we read.
Mm-hmm.
And according to like the recent movies that came out, Spider-Man's big attached to both of those characters. I mean, he's a super fan of Captain America, and he's Iron Man's like right-hand man. I don't know if that's like normal like Spider-Man stuff, but like that's what's been out in the recent like iterations of him.
Yeah, the movie, the Tom Holland version, is heavily based on like kind of that back and forth connection, and that makes sense given his introduction into the MCU was in Civil War. So in the original Civil War storyline in the comics, a big plot point of that is Spider-Man picking a side and revealing his identity. And so they do a similar thing here, not with revealing his identity, but just he has to pick a side of who he's going, who does he support?
Which is kind of fun because it's a little different in this comic.
Yeah, and I think one of the best things that for this comic, as opposed to say like the normal continuity, is it plays more off of history as a whole. So like you have in the 60s the Vietnam War starting up, and Spider-Man is struggling with his responsibility of, oh, I don't really support this war, and also I kind of need to be here, but I feel like because of my powers I should go to
I have
fight.
A responsibility to fight.
And so you have Iron Man who is in the Vietnam War at that point fighting, and then you have Captain America who he decides early on to go, but then he quickly realizes, oh wait, this isn't a war we should be fighting, and I'm going to help the innocents in Vietnam from the heroes.
Almost helps. He helps any person that needs help, basically, over there.
Yes.
He basically doesn't pick a side over there.
Yeah. And what I like about that is you already have, in the first issue set in the 60s, you have that kind of divide start early on. That way, when you get to the Civil War stuff later in this comic, it makes total sense. Honestly, it makes more sense than the actual Civil War storyline in the main comics. Because, with like comic events in the main continuity, they do play off past, storylines in issues, but this you get that impact so much more, I think, because it's so directly tied to what came before.
Yeah, you see that they are immediately at odds, and you can see why. I think the 6th issue or something like that, like you have a camp with Captain America and you have a camp with Tony Stark, and you can kind of see like even like with the Tom Holland Spider-Man stuff where he's a young kid and he attaches himself to Tony Stark because he's basically the leader of the Avengers. In that 6th issue, most of the people that are with Iron Man are young kids, and he's influential, but like once you get the older guys, they're like they see the side that he doesn't see, basically.
Yeah, and I think what I also really like about this comic and what they're able to do here, when we see them at that point, they are older. So like this starts in the 60s, but instead of Peter Parker staying 25 for 70 years, he ages with us, and as he would. So by the time you get to the Civil War storyline, which is set in like the 2000s, he's a 50, 60-year-old man. And because of that, he's in a different space in his life, so he makes different decisions.
Not quite as spry.
And that goes the same for the characters in the Marvel universe. Like Iron Man in this is essentially one of the villains.
It's almost like in this book he never decided to not make weapons anymore.
Yes, and so this plays more off of comic stuff than say like a movie thing. Where so in the movies at the end of Iron Man 1, Iron Man reveals that he's Iron Man.
Yeah.
Whereas in the comics for the longest time, and you see it in this,
it's separate.
He keeps a secret identity as Iron Man's my bodyguard.
Yeah.
And also, I guess in this particular kind of history, he doesn't learn the lesson he needs to not make weapons anymore. And so he's just a corporate asshole.
Just trying to make as much money as he possibly can.
So much money.
And be a government drone, basically.
Mm-hmm. And so I like that element of, even though this started out as an idea of, I want to do the Marvel Universe as a whole, I think it was better to work it into just one character, but I like that they were still able to show us this is how this universe would change over time if these guys didn't stay at their peak. Because a lot of this has to do with the fact that like these characters get older as they age, and they're getting slower and weaker, and so they have to think differently and make different decisions, and there's more responsibility. And like that is being a Spider-Man comic to its core, the main theme of this is still responsibility. Yeah. And I think that something you get out of this as opposed to a regular Spider-Man that you'd read in like a main Marvel comic is his decisions stay with him more. I think that when things happen in the 60s, like he makes mistakes, the biggest one being, what starts it all, that he doesn't stop the guy who eventually kills Uncle Ben. It doesn't just kind of go to the wayside. Like, it's constantly driving his motivations and what he wants to do. And it causes him problems over time.
Like, and all the way to the very end, the last couple pages, it even brings it up.
Yes, yeah, and I it's one of those things that I didn't think about that being as good as it could be. Like, we know that's his motivation starting out, but then after a certain point, you don't really see it brought up anymore unless it needs to be brought up for a particular, like, kind of emotional story beat.
Yeah.
But this is it affects the entire, like, 6 issues, and because of that, you get an ending that you don't really get in a Spider-Man comic because, I mean, spoilers, obviously, because we've
already read it.
We jump all around, but, like, he sacrifices himself, and it's because he kind of has this, like, weird, I don't know what you call it, like, mind chat with Mary Jane, saying that the reason that you've been doing this for all this time is because you want to make up for not saving Uncle Ben. And that's why you can't take that back, so that's why you choose to save everyone else. And he dies at the end of this comic doing just that. And you kind of see this, like, inner peace hit him at the very end of his life. And it's ever so more emotional because he's now a 70-year-old man. And that's something you don't get just seeing the same age Peter Parker X amount of time you've been reading these comics.
Yeah, this is honestly, like, one of the... Besides, like, Into the Spider-Verse, this is the only time I've ever seen, like, a Spider-Man character that's older than college-age Spider-Man. Mm-hmm. So it was super neat seeing... Because, like, you think of Spider-Man as this acrobatic guy that has strength that you don't really think about. And then all of a sudden, like, in one of the last couple issues, he's talking about how the fact, like, oh man, this is going to really hurt. I'm going to catch a bus. And my doctor's like, you probably should really only be catching cars at this point.
Yeah. And I think the only way that, like, to do these changes and to kind of have this evolution of a character like this, who is so well beloved, and, like, the thing is, people expect a certain kind of tone and personality out of someone as popular as Spider-Man. I think the reason that he's able to make something like this work is because at its heart, it's still Spider-Man. Like, from the kind of the peak of his age when he in the early 60s and 70s to when he's just a weak old man, Chip Zdarsky never loses that Spider-Man feeling, you know, like that banter, that dialogue, everything, that kind of the quippiness, it's still constant. Spider-Man's all about learning lessons, you know, sometimes hard lessons, but overall, like, kind of growing past them and becoming a better person. And I think that's why Zdarsky works so well with a character like this, is because he doesn't lose sight of that. Like, that's always going to be there when he writes this character.
Yeah, that's what I was going to mention, is, like, we have read 3 of his books, like we've said, and we have gone from, like, the silliest version of Chip Zdarsky to almost the most serious version that I've seen of him. Because, like, Stillwater was kind of in the middle. Like, we got some jokes, we got some quips and all that stuff, but, like, especially from, like, a Spider-Man book, this was pretty serious.
Yeah.
Like, some pretty serious, like, notes got hit, and it's like, oh, Chip Zdarsky can write the, like, heavy-hitting stuff alongside, like, just a goofy book about people that can stop time when they have sex.
Yeah, which we do need to get back to that at some point, because that is also a really good comic. And I absolutely agree. I think that by having a guy like this who kind of comes from a more comedic background and a lot of his stuff is more lighthearted, that's almost harder to kind of get into if, say, you started out as more of a dramatic writer. And I think that, and that's not a brand new opinion. You know, people say all the time that someone who is really good at comedy can get into a more kind of darker side of themselves a lot easier and pull it off better. And he's just a really good fit. And I think that we haven't really talked about him a lot since the beginning, but, like, Mark Bagley, his art, it's great. I think that
Spider-Man to a T.
It is Spider-Man to a T. And what I also like about it is it's a consistency that works for this time jump. Like, to have the same guy do all 6 issues, and you jump like 7 to 8 years each, because each issue is its own decade, and So you get to see that Spider-Man age, that Peter Parker age in quote-unquote real time.
Yeah.
And it's not off-putting.
It still looks like the same character, but just aged like you would normally see a person age in that amount of time.
And what I like he's also able to do with it is you show that age when you need to, but then it's also, you take it back when you need to. And I guess what I mean by that is whenever he's in the suit, and I love a good suit change in any superhero comic or medium.
Spider-Man's the best character for a suit change.
Oh, yeah.
He's constantly changing suits.
100%. And it's one of those things that, like, you get the guy who is one of the best Spider-Man artists of all time, have him come back in, just do what he knows, but also progress this suit. You know, like, we talked about him getting old. Well, that also reflects in his suit designs as it goes. So, like, you see, as he gets older, the suits become more kind of heavier and bulkier because he needs the armor to protect himself. But you still don't lose that kind of, that agility, that fluidness that you get from a Spider-Man comic when he's swinging around the city and punching a Doc Ock. So yeah, like, just excellent choice for an artist on this. And I think that works so well with Zdarsky's switch between tones of having these really heartfelt moments. And I never really even thought about it until I reread it today, and I noticed that they pair their art with their kind of story beats, their writing, really well, in a sense that anytime there's like a really serious moment, he's Peter Parker. Like, even if he has a suit, he has his mask off, so you kind of see like the wrinkles depending on his age, and like just he's so tired and just so over everything, but he needs to be Spider-Man.
That's what I was almost gonna like mention earlier. Like, this book, it wouldn't have the same draw without Spider-Man life story, but this book, more than anything, is Peter Parker life story. Mm-hmm. You see more Peter Parker than you ever see Spider-Man. Spider-Man's like the side character to seeing how Peter Parker like handles all of these situations. You see him out of the suit, at the very least 60-40 Peter Parker Spider-Man throughout this comic.
Okay, yeah.
Which isn't normally what happens with Spider-Man.
I think a lot of that can also be chalked up to just the fact that, hey, we've got 6 issues to do this.
Yeah.
So you do you pick your moments sparingly and when you need them.
And you can show Spider-Man doing a cool like scene pretty easily, like in a couple pages. Like, you can see like him doing the fights, and like, God, there's some cool fights with just like an absurd amount of characters, like superheroes and villains and all that sort of stuff. Like, we haven't even touched on the amount, like the vast amount of like characters that are included in this thing.
Yeah, let's go into a bit of it now. Like, you know, obviously Spider-Man, a big part of them are his rogues gallery, his villains. So we have a few of them in this.
So the main two that like last the entire like arc are obviously Norman Osborn as Green Goblin. We get him from top to bottom almost. Like, I think he stretches from like first issue all the way to like the 5th.
I think so, yes.
And then like Otto Octavius, who even becomes like a good guy for the middle part.
Yes.
He marries Aunt May, but isn't quite the man that she needs him to be, and also she kind of like she slowly starts to wither away, and he, I don't think, can accept that. And then like, I want to say Venom, but not really Venom. It's just the symbiote that makes an appearance like throughout. We never see Eddie Brock.
Eddie Brock is not in this.
We never see Eddie Brock. We only see the symbiote taking over different characters, basically. And, well, Spider-Man and Kraven.
Yes, so I did a bit of a deep dive on kind of why Chip Zdarsky picked because obviously this doesn't cover all of the important Spider-Man events. It covers most of them, I will say, but it doesn't cover all of them. So I wanted to see kind of why he picked the ones he picked, and the 80s issue in particular, just for him, was a tough one because that was kind of when he got into Spider-Man comics, and it had a lot of storylines he wanted to touch on. And so when it came to the symbiote, the black suit is originally introduced in an event called Secret Wars, which it's basically just like all the the superheroes get transported to a planet and they have to fight each other. And so that starts us off in the 80s issue. And from that event, Spider-Man gets the black suit, the famous symbiote suit, which at the time was just a black suit. It wasn't anything, crazy. It was only after that in Spider-Man comics that they turned it into Venom and the symbiote. But the reason why Eddie Brock isn't in this is because he also wanted to cover Kraven's Last Hunt.
Yeah.
Which is the and you see it here where Spider-Man is killed. I'm doing some air quotes here.
Yeah, killed.
Yeah. I know.
I heard it in your voice, but I'm glad you mentioned it.
I know the listeners know, obviously, but I want to make sure you caught on. But yeah, so he wanted to do Kraven's Last Hunt, but he said between wanting to do that and the setup between the black suit and Secret Wars, there wasn't really a kind of organic way to also fit in, hey, here's Eddie Brock who almost killed himself in a church, and he hates Spider-Man as much as the symbiote does.
Plus, he killed Gwen in a completely different way, so it wouldn't have made any sense.
Yeah, and he said that was kind of like his biggest challenge for this story as a whole, is to kind of like, I've got these events that I definitely want to cover, but how do I do the next set of events in a natural way? And I think he does something really interesting here where he's one of the guys who, for me anyway, he's one of the few guys who can change things in a Marvel or a DC continuity, and it just worked for me. The guy I think of for DC is Tom Taylor. He did Injustice, that whole storyline. And that deviates a whole bunch of stuff, but these are just two guys who understand what people like about these comics and kind of what they want to see. And so when they do make these changes, whereas in this instance, instead of Eddie Brock being the Venom, symbiote combination, it's Kraven.
Kraven makes sense. Spider-Man says it like in the comic. He's like, Kraven's one of my least villains. Like, he's a nobody.
He's a joke, yeah.
Yeah, he's a joke. Like, I can take him down easy.
Yeah.
He's just a guy that's good at hunting.
Yeah. And they also kind of, they introduced the aspect of, because the symbiote we know before this it's an enhancement suit. It makes him better. And before, he didn't like in the mainline continuity, he didn't need it, but then they work in his getting older and his getting weaker into him wanting to use it.
They do a really good job of it. And that part at the end, like, I mean, people know that we spoil anything anyways. The part where the symbiote suit was the one thing keeping Kraven alive, I didn't expect that at all. When I saw a skeleton come out of the suit, I was very surprised.
Yeah, and that's actually, I think, kind of what they were maybe referring to is, so in the past Carnage, Cletus Cassidy, like the body died a long time ago, but the symbiote absorbed the thoughts and personality of the host.
Okay.
So I think that's kind of what was maybe going on there as well. And that comes back to Mark Bagley's art. Like, it's just, it's silly and fun because at that point he is a Kraven Venom because he's got the dumb lion vest on top of the Venom symbiote that we know. And so you have this Venom, like we know what Venom looks like in the comics. He's just like this big hulking figure.
Yeah, black.
But then you also have the dumb lion vest thing on. Like, it's so dumb, but because of what's happening in the issue, like the fact that, like, oh, I'm fighting a corpse, and also I'm in space and I'm on my last leg, you also have that serious kind of element in there as well. Like, it's really good teamwork between these two, and I think you need something like that to make these moments hit in a contained comic, and that's why they got the people they did. I think between having Chip Zdarsky, having that Spider-Man tone down, between Mark Bagley having the recognizable standard, like this is the pinnacle of Spider-Man art, teaming up to then go through his entire history from like the death of Gwen Stacy to Miles Morales, but also we want to be able to change some things up. Just it works, and you kind of mentioned it before. They even take elements of storylines people hated that you think they'd avoid, but they touch on them still. I think the reason they touch on them is because it this story's about Spider-Man's history.
His entire run.
And they do the, I don't really know if you know a ton about this, but like they touch on one of the most infamous storylines in Spider-Man comics, and they make it better, and that's the Clone Saga.
I did not know about the clone stuff, but it was super cool, and then it also made me question a lot of stuff while I was reading it.
Yeah.
Because they're like, here's a clone of these 3 people. I didn't particularly like that the reason that Gwen Stacy was cloned was because the doctor was a pervy perv and just wanted to sleep with Gwen Stacy when she was finally willing and ready to sleep with him.
Yeah.
But the Ben Parker and like Peter Parker thing was neat, and it did give Peter Parker a reason to live a normal life for a while.
And like again, it's that juggling of, okay, we need to do these events in the time period that they're set in, but how do we, because we're doing our own thing, how do we naturally get from point A to point B? And the Clone Saga is a big part of that, and I think it's just funny that they took something that people in the 90s, there was the Clone Saga where basically he makes clones of Peter Parker and some other people, and it went on for years. It's like this weird mix of narrative but also like editorial demand of, at the time, Peter Parker was with Mary Jane, and he had his successful company, Parker Industries or whatever, and they got married. Yeah. And the biggest thing about Peter Parker and Spider-Man is he's a relatable superhero. Like the things that he's going through, people like, because it's
money
like
struggles and
girl troubles.
Rich,
yeah. So, but that wasn't there anymore. The editors at the time thought. So the idea was, okay, well, we don't want to kill this character, but what if we kind of push him to the side, give him a happy ending, and then we bring in a new guy who doesn't have the best life? And so they came up with the character of Ben Reilly. And
okay, yeah, that's his name, Ben Reilly.
Yes. And so they went back and forth on like, okay, the clone is this guy, the clone is actually you. It's one of like, the 90s is kind of like the dark age of superhero comics. Like it killed a lot of stuff for many reasons. But the Clone Saga is one of the ones that people always come back to as far as like...
They just ran out of ideas.
Exactly. And so they do that in 6 issues in a way that is interesting. And they also fold other events into it as well. So like in the original comics, Gwen Stacy is either killed by Spider-Man or the Green Goblin. Whereas in this, there was a clone of Gwen Stacy that ended up being swapped out for the real one. And so that's why Peter Parker and Gwen split. And then he eventually ends up with Mary Jane.
And that was a clever way to get him with Mary Jane.
Yes, yeah.
Because he didn't want to be with the clone version of his wife. He wanted to be with the real version of his wife. And because he couldn't do that, he had a reason to not be with her anymore.
Yeah. And so they lead into that. But then also he has problems with Mary Jane, and their marriage kind of falls apart for a bit. But then they always come back to the Ben Reilly thing to set up the next decade of events. And it even goes into a big Spider-Man kind of crossover event, which would have been Spider-Verse, which is the Moreland vampire dude.
Yeah, so I was just assuming that was the Morbius thing, but apparently that's something different.
So this is probably the weakest part of this entire comic, just because the event is, like, the thing it's based off of isn't that great, but basically, like, Spider-Verse...
I think it was just a way to tell us that his kids had powers more than anything.
Yeah, so, like, Spider-Verse is an event that has been in the comics for years, but it all centers around the idea of, like, there's this vampire race of people who only feed off of people with spider powers.
Okay.
And that's why there's that whole mention in the comic of, like, spider totems and Moreland and I can't be destroyed, blah, blah, blah. Like,
I didn't know any of that. And
I think the reason you don't know any of that is because it's not that good.
And I bet you people would need a drink to have to deal with all of that stuff.
Oh my God, Higgins, we've been talking about this comic for years, it seems like.
So
and we haven't even gotten into the drink we're drinking.
All of the dumb things we've been saying would be complemented perfectly with a very good drink. Spider-Man's a classic, so we decided to go with the classic cocktail. Spider-Man's also from New York, so we picked the Manhattan.
Mm-hmm.
And I honestly thought I was going to hate it.
Although I think he's from Queens.
Yeah, no, he's from somewhere else in New York for sure.
But he's definitely been to a Manhattan.
He's New York's superhero.
Yes, yeah.
And so he picked the Manhattan, and I really thought I was going to hate it. This drink was very good.
You never had a Manhattan?
I've never had a Manhattan.
Really?
Yeah, never in my life, because I'm not a huge just straight whiskey drinker. But guys, you don't have to be. This thing was delightful. It's mostly just whiskey. So I'll just give you the quick rundown. 2 parts rye whiskey. Get that bourbon out of here. They don't want it. That's an old fashioned. It's a completely different drink. You're gonna add another part of sweet vermouth, and then a couple dashes of Angtarosa bitters, and then a dash of orange bitters. And you top that bad boy off with a garnish of cherries or a lemon twist. That's up to you.
You used those fancy cherries, though, didn't you?
I did use the maraschino cherries that we had from our drink from last time. And
might I say, chef's kiss on this one.
We'll poke a couple on a toothpick, drop that bad boy in, and just see what happens.
Might I also say, chef's kiss on me, because I had toothpicks ready to go.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Great drink, though, guys.
Yes.
Very good. Like, honestly didn't think I was going to like it, and all of the flavors worked
Are you saying
very well together.
Are you saying all these nice things because you maybe want another one?
I could go for another one. Do you want another one?
Higgins.
We only have we literally are almost out of our bullet rye whiskey.
Higgins, this is as we know, this is a family-friendly podcast sponsored by 008 Studios. But might I say, heck yeah.
All right. Shit. I hope they don't mind that.
I'm sure it's fine.
We were talking about the drink, right?
Higgins, we were talking about so many things. Villains, drinks. Did we talk about that? Did we talk enough about villains? Talk about Venom.
We talked about some villains. We talked about Norman Osborn being the Green Goblin. We didn't talk about Harry Osborn kind of being the Black Goblin, which I always connected him to being the Hobgoblin.
I think he is the Hobgoblin. That one's the one that really kind of threw me off. I don't know if the Black Goblin... because
maybe it's just some other story where they named him something else.
Yeah, well, because in this, he's just... it's the Green Goblin costume, but he's black, basically. And I think the point... this Harry Osborn is... he has the look of the 90s animated series mixed with the personality of a James Franco. He kind of has that same redemption arc.
He kind of sucks, but he's good by the end.
Yeah.
This isn't related to anything at all, but why do they have cornrows? They have cornrows, right?
They've had it since the 60s. Yeah.
Okay, so they do have what looks... I'm assuming it's not cornrows, but it looks like cornrows.
It's 100% cornrows.
And I hate it.
Yeah. That's what I think of when I think of Harry and Norman Osborn, is that look. Because they look exactly the same. One's just got more wrinkles than the other. There's nothing really to touch on in that whole kind of... it plays out pretty much the way it does in the mainline comics, where Harry's just the sucker for his dad's approval, and his dad knows that, so he uses it. But they do kind of have this nice...
oh, sorry.
No, Higgins, I'll forgive it this once. But they kind of have a nice-ish moment where... because Norman's been pulling some strings behind the scenes for a very long time, and it gets Harry killed, which he doesn't know about. And then when Peter tells him, it hits him oh, my son, I love my son. All that stuff
that
is
part was
pretty
kind
well
of
done.
Not what I was expecting.
What were you expecting?
Oh, it's just him caring at all that his son had died in the first place. I was not expecting him to even be worried about it. Also, I was not expecting Norman Osborn to even be alive. I was just waiting for him to get skewered by the...
oh, by the Goblin Glider.
The Goblin Glider.
In this, he just has a heart attack, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, something. I don't know.
What I like about the end of Norman Osborn is it plays into Peter Parker's development as a character, because basically all his problems stem from his over devotion to being Spider-Man and his company.
Yeah.
It causes multiple marriages and relationships to fall apart. And it's, I think, only basically after that he realizes, oh, I need to be there for my kids and my wife. And so by seeing Norman Osborn, who's this old man who just is alone, and he loses the last family member that gave a shit about him because of him, and then he dies of the heart attack. All that speaks to me as like teaching Peter responsibility is important, but it's what I have responsibility to that matters. And so it's from there that he decides he's going to switch lives with Ben Reilly, basically, and go off the grid to raise his children and be with his, and mend the relationship with MJ. And then that's when you jump to like the Spider-Verse Moreland stuff. And at that point, it gives me vibes of what was that first comic we ever did for this podcast? It was the Superman. Secret Identity.
Secret Identity.
Yes, yeah.
There it is.
Because, you know, it's...
Man, what a stretch.
Together.
3.5 years ago.
Crazy. Don't even want to think about it.
3 1/3 years ago, because we're only like in the 4th. We started in February.
Yeah. So what, we would have been like 12 back then.
Yeah.
Yeah, now we're 18, just young and spry.
Yeah, just like Spider-Man.
Just like Spider-Man, but not in this comic. He's real old by that time. But yeah, I like that Norman Osborn is this lesson for him to realize, like, oh, I could have easily ended up as this guy and like drove my children to hate me and eventually kill them because of what I'm doing. And so I need to step back. But then it comes around again where there's some things he can't give up. For instance, being Spider-Man. Like, there's a really good moment with, in this continuity, Spider-Man has 2 kids. He has twins.
Yeah. Ben and Claire.
Yes, which I don't...
Does Claire have a significance?
Like a name?
Name significance?
I don't think
so. I can't think of anything.
I can't either. But she's the most interesting out of the twins just because she has the most to do. Like...
I don't think Ben has full Spider-Man powers. I'm pretty sure she's the one that like is the heir to Spider-Man.
It seems like if he does, he doesn't have it for long because he gets attacked by Moreland.
He might have got it sucked out by Moreland.
Yeah.
In order to save his mother.
Claire is she has more of his personality. Like, they kind of butt heads more in a way that helps them both, because the reason he decides to get involved with the whole Moreland incident is because of her. She basically says, like, hey, you always talk about responsibility. You have responsibility to us and to stop this guy. And also, I know you've been doing Spider-Man stuff. And that's classic Spider-Man, of even though he's technically given up the role to Ben at that point, whenever someone's in danger, he can't help but step in.
So these kids are created by this story.
I think.
No, I just looked it up.
Cool.
So these kids are created by this story.
Yeah, he's had multiple children in different comic timelines over the years. Like, I think the most famous would probably be, he had a daughter in one storyline called Mayday Parker, and she becomes Spider Girl for a little bit. It's a storyline where basically like him and MJ get married and they become a whole like Spider-Man family, because I think MJ in that timeline gets Spider-Man powers at some point.
Spider Tiger,
yeah.
Something like that.
It's got some stripes worked into the costume.
There's no way for me to work this in like naturally, but I'm going to throw it in. When I was buying this book, I was like just looking through like doing the reviews to make sure to like I was getting the book that I did, because sometimes Amazon sends you bullshit like when you like order something.
Yeah.
Like, I almost ordered like Catch 22, and it like I went down in the reviews and they were like, this is like review copy of like this book. Like, it's like, this is a 50-page book about the book Catch 22. And I was like, well, fuck.
And
sorry.
It's $10.
Hold up. Well, shit. You throw that in there instead of, the other one.
Yeah, I can do that.
We're E. But there's a picture I have on my phone that I took like when I ordered it, and it's a quote from Chip Zdarsky, and it says, "Straight up, question mark, I've never been scared of spiders. you come at me with a rubber spider, and I'll just be like, so what? And I was like, that's the most Chip Zdarsky thing I could have seen, like, underneath of a Spider-Man book.
This guy gets me. He knows my humor. Yeah, so I like, as far as Spider-Man's kids goes, because these have multiple different versions of children over the years, I think these are my second favorite pair. Like, I've read a little bit of stuff with the Mayday Parker version, and I think she's the best, but she also is a lot of this Claire Parker that we see in this. You know, just, she has Peter Parker's kind of personality to the point where it's like, oh, I see something's wrong, I need to, you know, get involved and fix it, kind of thing. And I forgot what I was saying. These Manhattans are really hitting me. These Manhattans are really hitting me.
This is like one of the first, honestly, the last time that we got hit this hard was one of the bullet drinks, so
yeah,
it only makes sense that this one's going to hit us also.
I've been hit this hard since we were in that car park that one night.
Yeah.
And we strolled up on the wrong guys at the wrong time. Got some lunch after the words, though. That was real nice.
Oh, yeah.
But, yeah, like, I like that they have this kind of influence on Peter to get him back into the game because he has to. Like, at one point, I'm like, oh, it would have been kind of nice to just see this version of Peter Parker retire and, like, have a happy ending. But we all know that when it comes to Spider-Man, there's always going to be something or someone that kind of gets him back.
Draws him back, yeah.
Yeah, and for this, it's his kids, and, you know, the stuff with Moreland. I will say that, like, the last 2 issues of this, while still very good, are probably the weakest of the 6.
Oh, yeah, the last 2, for sure.
This version, this particular point, for me, is probably my least favorite issue. I don't want to say worst because none of it's bad, but like, because the thing about Moreland is he's tied to the Spider-Verse event, and the fun thing about the Spider-Verse event is it has all the different versions of Spider-Man from across the different universes. This is how we get Spider-Gwen, is this comic event. And we don't get anything like that in this, and I think that's maybe one of the biggest missteps that this creative team took when they made this story.
Do you want to know what Earth we're on in this book?
Is it 2249?
No, it's 19,529.
Damn it. All right. Well, I'm going to have to issue a strong letter to Wikipedia because they told me 2249.
Well, at least the part where, like, he has kids.
Yeah.
That's that. So, like, we might be tapping into multiple Spider universes, but
a multiverse of sorts.
Yeah.
Okay.
Spider-Man's one of the main superheroes I think of when I see multiverses. He's
the most interesting because, like,
he has multiple versions of himself a lot of the time.
Yeah, and, like, they don't work the multiple Spider-Verse stuff into this story, but they do kind of take elements of that. Like,
yeah,
in the mainline continuity, there is the universe with the Superior Spider-Man in it, and that's the last issue of this, which is really, I guess, like the last issue I have to talk about, where they throw in the introduction of Miles Morales, because the last issue is set in the 2010s, and I think Miles Morales is introduced in, like, 2011, if I remember correct, by Brian Michael Bendis and Sarah Pirelli. Really good stuff there, but I like the, and that's the last villain we haven't really touched on that much, is Doc Ock. Did you like the stuff they did in the last issue with the Superior Spider-Man?
With Doc Ock?
Yeah. So, like, and we talked about it plenty of times before, but basically in the Superior Spider-Man run, which I'm sure we'll cover one day, it's about Doc Ock transfers his mind into the body of Peter Parker to become, you know, new and renewed, and he's going to be a better version of Spider-Man than he could have ever thought to be.
So he did that with Miles Morales in this story.
Yes. And I like that the reason behind that is because we've been aging Peter Parker in real time, so it makes sense that he wouldn't want to take over Peter Parker because he's a 70-year-old man.
Yeah,
he would want to take over a new Spider-Man.
Yeah. I don't know how I feel about it, but it is neat to see that Doc Ock is a bad guy, but he wants to be good at least a little bit. So it is nice. He did good things in the worst way possible, basically.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of this like misguided
way to be a hero.
Yes.
And like a lot of the time when they mention the word hero, when in reference to Doc Ock, it's in quotation marks in this comic, I think. Don't quote me on that.
I'm too drunk to argue with you right now.
All right. But yeah, it was super neat. Miles Morales is a very small portion of this. I did like the last issue. It was very weird Spider-Man stuff for me.
It is the silliest that it probably gets as a comic, because like they have to go, like, just the entire concept of the issue is, okay, we got to go into space to create an EMP to stop Doc Ock from, or not Doc Ock, Doctor Doom from taking over the world. But also, Kraven symbiote is here with us on the ship, and Miles Morales is, he's a skeleton, and Miles Morales is Doc Ock. I think part of the reason why it's so silly is because when we start in the issue in the 60s, it's grounded comparatively.
Yeah.
So I like that element of it, and that's how the comics continuity works in the mainline stuff is, we're just playing off anything that's ever happened, and so you have to be okay with the conceit that this is going to get really weird. So I like that element of it. It does have a lot less kind of personal stuff in it, I guess, compared to the issues prior. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, it makes sense. I can't think of anything to say that I really want to say about this book. I want people to read this book, and this is one of the books that I've, like, literally 3 people have told me they wanted to read the copy of my comic, and that's the first time that I've ever had that happen. And I don't want to give too much away, because we've literally talked our asses off about this book.
This one's a little longer,
and we still have not touched half of the stuff that happens in it.
We're at around an hour-ish, and
and I'm gonna cut us off on like the comic book talk.
Okay.
Yeah, and we're gonna jump into our ratings.
Higgins, I just love Spider-Man so much. I can talk about Spider-Man all day.
I know, but we have to have structure. Hold up. We have to have structure.
Good.
The last time I said it, it sounded like I was drunk.
Oh, I thought you wanted to like get that slap in there. That was what was important.
That being said,
just to be safe, Higgins, I'm gonna leave all of that in, just to make sure I get whatever it is you want me to get.
All right. Good. That being said, there is an annual that we did not read.
Oh, I read it.
I will. No, don't talk about it.
Can I talk about it for like a second?
No, we're gonna talk about it we're gonna talk about it next issue.
Next issue.
Yeah, in a new segment.
Higgins, there's gonna be so much more to talk about in the next episode.
In a new segment.
A new segment.
Okay, I'll come up with a new theme song and everything.
Higgins, you're doing something very, very special, and I appreciate it.
All right. But yeah, there's an annual that I did not read, that I did not know existed. We'll talk about it next issue.
Mm-hmm.
And for now, we are going to hop into our rating and some other things.
Oh, very good.
Do you have a rating, or do you want me to hop in with mine?
I'll let you go first this time.
All right. I'm gonna go with about 50 years of Spider-Man as my rating. I know we covered 60, but I'm giving it a 9 out of 10.
I mean, if we're being like technical, we covered 57, but that's okay.
So like 92 then, 9.2 out of 10.
Let's see, it started in 66 and it went to 2019. How much is that? Is that 57?
I don't know.
That's a certain determinate amount of time.
Yeah. So I'm giving it about a 9 and some change out of 10.
Oh wow, you really liked it then.
Yeah, I really did like it.
Good. Yeah. I'm glad, because like I knew I loved this because I've read it multiple times, but kind of going in my rating, I think that for people that don't read comics, that know enough about Spider-Man, like they've seen a lot of the movies or whatever, and they've maybe watched the show or two, at that point you have enough knowledge to jump in and get something out of this. And so for that reason, I'm going to shoot about 5 out of 5 webs, I think. I I'm biased because I love this character.
A goddamn 10 out of 10?
It's a goddamn 10 out of 10 or a 5
Have we had a 10 out of 10 on the podcast before? Because I don't think so.
Well, like,
what a milestone, folks.
It is for both us and this book, obviously, because like before no one cared about this book. Now that we've reviewed it,
I'm not gonna lie,
big stuff.
Jeff Lemire, I will say he is our top guy.
This is Chip Zdarsky, but go on.
No, I'm saying Jeff Lemire is by and far like our favorite author between the two of us. And then I think Chip Zdarsky is the second best in our eyes.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. I think for me with Chip Zdarsky is, like, Jeff Lemire can write anything he wants to and it'd be great. But I think what Chip Zdarsky is really good at is he knows what projects fit him best.
Yes.
And this is no exception for me. I think this is just kind of like, it's the perfect like marriage between this guy's tone and personality and a property, if that makes any kind of sense. So yeah, 5 out of 5 webs. Flip. We did that picture earlier. Maybe you'll post that?
Yeah, no, I'm for sure going to post that.
Oh, thank God, because I would look real foolish. I would sound real foolish right now if you didn't. So thank you. So yeah, the Spider-Man life story. 1 out of 5
out of 5 webs.
5 out of 5 webs. 1 to 6 issues.
Boys and girls, Snoop's drunker than me on this episode.
It rarely happens, but here we are. You make a good Manhattan, Higgins. I will say that. I'm not going to say you make as good of one as the lady, because I don't want to get in trouble.
Oh, okay.
But also, she makes a damn good Manhattan.
I've never had one before, so I trust you.
Very good. So if you want to move on to a different segment.
Readings for squares.
Oh my gosh, Higgins. It's a new segment of the show.
I know you told me you had some stuff that you want to talk about.
You're damn straight I do, Higgins.
I would love for you to go first. I normally go first, and I hate hearing myself talk, so I would love for you to go through. I know you had maybe like a game and a show maybe you want to talk about.
I'm only going to talk about one because I feel like he deserves it. The he I'm referring to specifically is so basically there was a voice actor who passed away since our last episode. His name was Billy Kometz. You might know him from, I guess his biggest thing is probably he voiced the 4th JoJo in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Okay. The one with the hair.
Oh,
little pompadour hair. No, the one before that.
Okay, the brown haired.
He had like purplish hair.
Oh, okay.
Josuke. But yeah, so Billy Kometz, he unfortunately passed away between this episode and last episode from colon cancer. He was only 35. It was real sad. I was kind of bummed to hear about it. So I decided to do a deep dive on some of his work, and I wanted something to talk about for this to kind of, just pay my respects. And so I decided to watch a movie called Promare. It's on HBO Max.
Promare?
Yeah, Promare.
How do you spell that?
Promare.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
For me and the listeners.
You're welcome. So yes, it's a movie on HBO Max.
I know you told me about it, but I did not watch it yet.
It's okay. I told you very recently, so it's fine. You didn't have the time to do it. But I really liked it. I think that as, just talking about him in particular, it is a great showcase of what he could bring as a voice actor. There are different kinds of voice actors, especially in anime, ones that kind of bring a more subtle approach to their performance. And then there's the fun ones that kind of are just very bombastic and over the top, but it works for an anime. You know that as well as I do. The premise of this is you get kind of a little flashback sequence of there are people who spontaneously combust, and then there was a big war between people who do that and people who don't, and they were kind of pushed back, and now we're in the present day of this movie. And since then, there have been like firefighter brigade. Since then, there have been firefighter brigade. I can't say this word.
Fire brigade.
You can't say it either, apparently.
Fire brigade.
There are firefighters that are set to fight these people who have flame powers, basically. This is produced by Studio Trigger, who they have done things like Gurren Lagann.
Okay.
Oh, you seen some of Gurren Lagann?
I know about that. It's like a What's that, like a robot suit type anime?
Absolutely it is. And like, so kind of their claim to fame is for anime, they are the over the top ones. Like, just stuff happens for no reason. Physics don't apply. Action's gonna action.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah. And so Billy, as a voice actor, he plays the main character. His name is Gallo Timus, I think. He's part of this firefighter force, and he's fighting these terrorists. They're called Burnish. And there's a little bit of kind of behind the scenes, like, well, this is where the Burnish come from. This is really what they want to do. Maybe they're not the bad guys we think they are, and maybe the good guys we think are with us aren't really that good. It is a very ridiculous mech-centric focused movie. If you don't like anime, this is not for you. But I think just going into this, wanting to see a performance out of this guy, it is a shame that he has passed. Like, for English dub actors, like, anime is hit or miss in a lot of ways. A lot of it comes down to performance and kind of hitting the heights and the emotions that a lot of anime writing has. No struggle for this guy. He is just like your typical anime hero, just very pure of heart, very energetic, and Billy delivers 150% in this performance. I think that if you just want to see a fun anime movie with great animation between not only his performance, but also obviously like the supporting cast. One of the guys is Steve Bloom, who did like Spike Spiegel from Cowboy Bebop. You know, he's one of the greats. Yeah. And there's a bunch of other voice actors who are big in the industry. But I watched this for Billy, and it's bittersweet because it's like, man, what a great voice actor. It sucks that he's gone, but really good movie.
I'll hop on that and I'll talk about it next week. Excellent. So I can give you a little bit of how I feel about it.
I'd love that. But can you wait until next month when we come back?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
But I'll watch it next week.
Okay, cool. I like that as well. But yeah, without giving more away, like I said, it's anime characters fight fires, and people that create fires is kind of the basic premise. If you have any interest in that, give it a shot. And RIP to Billy Kometz. I think real shame to lose someone that talented.
Did you have anything else you would like to talk about?
No, I wanted to just kind of do that. And
give him his
give him his due. Yes, yeah.
All right. I might say two things. Okay.
Ooh, I'm okay with that.
I watched this movie called. You might have heard of it. It came out in like 2009.
I was around in 2009.
It's called Jennifer's Body.
You did tell me you watched Jennifer's Body.
I've watched other things that are probably more important, but Jennifer's Body, I'm just gonna tell you right now, it's a gym. It's a gym. It's about the dumbest thing I've ever watched. It was very fun to watch. It was a little spooky. It wasn't that spooky. But Megan Fox is a succubus. And she says all of the words that make 2009. I heard so many things that just made me like cringe, but also one of the best lines that I've ever heard. There is a emo guy that she like seduces in order to eat him. And one of my favorite lines in the movie, she takes off his pants very firmly. And then she says, "Nice hardware, Ace." And as you know, there's a company called Ace Hardware.
Very good.
And it was one of my favorite movie lines that I've ever heard in my entire life.
That is quality writing if I've ever heard it.
And there's plenty of other things that made me like cringe. She says so many things that I hate. She says, "You gave me a real wetty." When she wanted someone to stop talking, she said "shutty" instead of "shut up." It was a very fun watch. It wasn't scary at all. It was just funny. It might have scared me when I was like 10, but other than that, I was fine. I'm not gonna give it any more than that. It was a fun movie to watch. If you've never seen it before, give it a good red hot go.
What'd you watch that on?
It's on Amazon Prime.
Oh, okay.
Recently.
Very good. Very good.
I also just recently got an iPad to replace my computer.
It's true. It's right there. I could see it.
With this iPad, I got Apple Arcade. So
that's the
for 3 months for free.
That's the I guess the Netflix of games on Apple, right?
Yeah. So it's like iPad, it's like Apple's version of like like high quality games for mobile devices. And so I got a couple of pretty cool ones that I would like to talk about. One of them's called What the Golf.
And I've heard about that.
So it's a golf game. Like, you know, you're Tiger Woods. You pull the thing back, you swing it forward, and it shoots something out. This game starts out that way, and it very fastly becomes something completely different. You're pulling back, and then like you think you're gonna hit a golf ball, and then all of a sudden your golf club goes flying down the course, or like a couch, or a TV, or something else. Like there's a lot of different things that they have a very like vast amount of things that happen when they're, and it's pretty cool little like small game you can play. And I think Apple Arcade costs like $4.99 a month or something like that, and for 3 months free, it's kind of a cool thing to do on your like iPad.
Yeah, I think they give that with like any new Apple product you buy right now. You'll get a 3-month trial to Apple Arcade. And
then the other one that I did was Manifold Garden. And it was like kind of like an Escher-esque like map, if you know like MC Escher. Does that make sense? Like the weird triangle where it looks like it's like 3-dimensional, but like kind of weird 3-dimensional like almost.
Like a pyramid?
Like it looks like when you're walking up one way, you're also walking down the other way kind of thing, where it's like kind of weird.
Okay.
And you kind of like have to spin the map that you're on to like make the person walk the way that you want them to walk, and certain stuff like that. You'll like spin it one way, and then like something that you wouldn't have reached one way, if you spin it this way, it gets you to be able to reach that way with your like character and stuff like that. It's a puzzle game, but it's pretty cool. Yeah, I had a lot of fun playing it.
Okay. That sounds like a lot of those games on Apple Arcade that I've heard about sound like they'd be up your alley.
They're very like puzzly.
Yeah, just kind of quick, like no faffing about. Just like, here's the gameplay. If you like it, you like it. If not, move on, kind of thing. Yeah. How this is not really about anything in particular, but how's the performance on the iPad as far as playing some games? Get a good frame rate?
Yeah, I never once does a skip or anything like that.
Excellent. I bet you can play that from the comfort of your own couch.
Yeah, comfort of my own bed even.
I think the bed is for business and business alone, unless it also relates to pleasure.
Yeah.
But, you know, again,
my business is pleasure. So.
We're a family-friendly podcast, so we're not going to go into any more detail than that.
But I'm going to hop into some sweeping up, I think. I have other things I can talk about, but I'll talk about them next week. You can talk to us at a lot of different places. You can find me on Twitter at MikeHiggins93 and Instagram at JSterm93. I would love to hear from you. You can find Snoop at Snoop_Lynch at both of those things. And if you want to talk to either of us, we would prefer that you send us an email at comicsologyclub@gmail.com.
Now, Higgins,
we didn't get the in front of it for our email or for our Gmail, right?
Yeah, well, that's the thing is you've said that, and I just want to make sure. I mean, like either way, this will be embarrassing, but I just want to make sure that no one's been emailing us because I haven't really checked the email since I set it up that last time. So maybe just like, I don't know, tell us about your day. Like
I had a fine day.
Yeah,
I did all right.
It did all right.
Yeah, like, I could have done better, could have done worse.
Well, that's life, isn't it, Higgins? Like there's always going to be something you could do better, but it's not important to harp on that, you know? What do you think our email password is, though?
I have absolutely no idea, because he made it.
I did make it. I made most, if not all, the passwords. I don't know if you heard that little click I just did.
Yeah, I did hear your click.
You did hear the little boot?
Yeah.
All right. No worries. I got our little logo in on it. Okay. Good news, Higgins. No emails right now. But maybe one day we'll have some. And if you want to be the first person to email us, guess what? You can do so, as Higgins said, at comicsologyclub@gmail.com.
God, we would love it. We would love for you guys to tell us anything. Tell us anything about one of our recent or any episodes that you guys have questions about.
That's true. We'd love to give a little shout out on your opinions of our most recent episode, Spider-Man Life Story. Like, what did you think of it? Did you think that there was enough Spider-Man? Did you think that there was enough life story?
Did you think that we could have talked about anything else?
Did you think we could have just not talked at all?
We are constantly searching for new comics to read. If you have something that you would want us to read, that would be super cool to send to us, and we will for sure read it. And anything else, like ask us what our underwear color is. Mine's gray tonight.
Oh no, I'm not wearing any.
Well, there you go. The mystery's over. I think that's it. Our sponsor is 008 Studios.
Mm-hmm.
You can find them on 0-8studios.com. You can find them for any of your needs for media, except music. Fuck music. Sorry, I said the F word again.
You said the music word too. So just,
but beyond that, we're just gonna tell you what we're gonna read next, and we decided to read a book that we both have already read, which I think is the first for the podcast. But we are reading the first volume of Saga by Brian K. Vaughan, and it is a delight. This might be the first 10 out of 10 for both of us, and that's all I have to say.
Oh, really? All right. Well, we're both learning today, aren't we?
Yeah.
First volume, I think it's like, what, six or seven
issues? 6 or 7 issues. I already own it. I'm ready to read it.
I'm going to have to get the big book that I have from my sister because I let her borrow it, and odds are she hasn't read it. But maybe, just maybe, if she has, I might ask her if she wants to join us. And talk about
that's fine.
Why not?
I would love a guest.
Yeah. Why not? We love guests, don't we, Higgins?
Yeah.
And if you want to guest on this podcast,
shoot us an email on comicsologyclub@gmail.com.
He took the words right out of my mouth. And so I hope you enjoyed this podcast. I hope you enjoyed this book. And until next time, I will say cheers, guys. And Higgins, as always, would like to say
Spider-Man.
That's what he loves to say, Spider-Man.